JJ Winlove, congratulations on June again.
Oh, thank you.
Let's just start off, just quickly outline the basic story premise of your film June again.
A woman living with dementia experiences a lucid spell, tracks down her errant family, and in the few hours she has, tries to pull them back together.
You deserve thanks for putting Noni Hazlehurst front and centre in a film. Tell me a bit about casting her and what you knew about Noni Hazlehurst, and did you actually go back into the archive?
Yeah, I had to. I mean, I grew up in New Zealand, so a lot of my peers and friends grew up with Noni on Play School. I didn't have that in New Zealand, so I didn't appreciate how much of an icon she was in that sense until I started, until my friends found out that she was cast in the role. But in terms of her roles since then, I mean, she's such a powerhouse, and I agree. I mean, I think it's about time that she had a role like this where she has front and center, presence. And she was so perfect for this role because I needed someone who could get away with being the meddling busybody that she is, but that you would still love her for it. You'd forgive her for all her kind of indiscretions because she has this kind of built-in warmth that's just completely natural to her. That is, she couldn't do away with that if she tried, and so. That was critical, and she was so perfect in that sense for the role.
Having thanked you for that, I must also extend my condolences sincerely to you that your film was not released a couple of months, even a couple of weeks before The Father.
Mm.
You know why I'm asking that? Because you have devices in this film that people are going to see and they're going to go, hey, look, that's just like in The Father.
Yeah.
When, if life was fair, people would have been watching The Father and going, hey, we saw this in that Australian movie, June Again. Can you just
Yeah.
tell me a bit about that, mate?
Yeah. I mean, so what you're talking about, I saw The Father in a preview screening about probably a month ago, and I was sitting in the audience just with my jaw dropped open, just how many similarity, the devices that you speak of that we'd employed in the film. And I was thinking exactly what you're thinking. Like, this is a film like this with so much crossover has to come out weeks before our film, especially because we were delayed by a year because of COVID. And yeah, I thought all those things. People are going to think that we, even though we've come out a month later, that maybe we kind of robbed them of their ideas and things. Um, my hope is that there's such different films. I mean, that film is centered around that kind of premise, and it doesn't kind of leave that world, which is why it's so powerful. But we've kind of used that as a kind of bookend to June's experience, where she does kind of get away from that, and she has this whole kind of life. And the film is really kind of about where she, her lucid spell between those two blocks of dementia that she has. So I'm hoping that we won't be tarred with that brush. That people will kind of they might pick up on that similarity, but they'll appreciate that they're two very different films.
And you deserve credit for using that device before you even knew about this film. And that
Mm.
this film was completed a year ago, and I understand would have been released a year ago. So I'm just making sure that, in fairness to you, that that's on the record and is acknowledged. That that's the case. This film would have come out a year earlier.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, COVID.
Thanks. Yeah. Nice work.
There have been The Father. There's a current film called Supernova.
Yeah.
There was Iris, of course. There's been a lot of films
Mm.
recently dealing with dementia, dealing with Alzheimer's. What has brought you to this topic?
There's a number of things that have brought me to this topic. I mean, the thing that most people ask me is there someone in my life who is living with dementia or has lived with dementia? And the answer is no. But I've always had a fascination with memory and how key our memories are to who we are, how much of our identity is tied up with our, our experiences and our memories, and how lost we would be without those memories. And the other thing that led to this film, that me wanting to make this film, was my love of the older audience that go to see these films. And often I'll go to see a film on my own, and I'll be sitting there, and a group of women in their 60s or 70s will show up, and they'll sit behind me, and the sense of excitement and enthusiasm for a film, and the kind of lack of cynicism that a lot of the rest of the audience have, just a total openness to a great story and great characters, is something. I remember just sitting there thinking, I want to make a film for these people, because they're just so open to a good story and good characters. And that was a big inspiration for wanting to tell a story for that audience, because they're the ones that show up to the cinema. They're still showing up, and if it's a good story, if they relate to it, they'll tell all their friends. You can tell it moves them, it affects them in a significant way, and that's why I want to make films.
Okay. Going on what you just said there, this is your first film, and very audience aware, very audience specific. I just want to know, is that a principle that you want to take throughout your filmmaking career? And are you aware of how that hasn't always been the guiding principle for a lot of Australian films?
I am aware of that. I think, if you're a filmmaker, you have to be realistic about what you're trying to do. And I think the first thing you have to think about is there an audience for what you want to do? Because if there isn't, then you're kind of already on the back foot. And I think the first thing you want to do is find an audience for what you want to do, and you find where that audience is. If it's a young audience, where are the young audience going to find content and film and so on, and chase them there. Don't expect them to come to whatever platform you happen to favor. I think understanding your audience is everything. I think, and that excites me, because my end goal, and I think any filmmaker's end goal, is to reach an audience. So, you might have a beautiful idea for a cinematic experience that is designed for an audience that don't go to the cinema, and it'll probably never get made. But if it does, you probably won't get the kind of results or the box office, or the feedback or the critical acclaim that you hope for. And especially with cinema at the moment, it is struggling. It is kind of a tricky time for cinema. So I think that for me was the appeal, and I think that was the appeal for the production company C Pictures, who became involved, because they knew that the audience that I was going for was the audience that are actually still going to cinema.
Now, as your first film, and as quite a renowned short filmmaker, and you have made some wonderfully interesting and funny short films, I'm keen to know how hard it was. It's always hard to make your first feature film. How hard was it for you?
It was harder than I was expecting, I must be honest. As you say, I've made quite a lot of short films, and I thought this would just be a longer short film. It would be all the same things, but just longer. More shoot days, and then we'd have a film. But there's so much more to it. It was such a learning curve. There's so many more people involved. There's so many more. It's a whole machine. And what you realize as a director, or is that you're just one part of a much bigger tapestry. As a short filmmaker, you're everything. Or I have been. I'm the producer, I'm the writer, I'm the director, I'm the legal person, I'm the safety person, I'm everything. But when you're involved in a feature film, you can't. No one person can take all those roles. So you have to involve a myriad of different people, and with that comes a whole, obviously a bunch more people, but with that comes so much more expertise and people who that's what they do, and they're good at it, and they take it to another level. So as hard as it was to step up to a feature film, it was such an amazing opportunity, because I was suddenly working with experts that were taking over the roles that I would have done as a short film. The post-production people, the audio people, the set builders, the props people, it was amazing to see everyone go off and do their thing and come back, and things that you hadn't even contemplated was suddenly you notice in the background there's this beautiful arrangement. There's these props that you hadn't even kind of talked about are suddenly there, and they're so perfect for the situation, and that applies to the sound, it applies to the actors, it applies to everything, and that was one of the most satisfying parts of the experience, was just working with so many amazing people.
I was just going to make the note that it sounds like you were initially reluctant to delegate, but that once you saw the results, you were very, very happy with the idea of having experts taking
Yeah.
care of things that you normally would do on a short film.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know if I'd say I was reluctant, but I was so used to having to, because it was either I did it or it didn't get done. And then suddenly it's like, no, no, you don't have to worry about that, and the financial side of it, the legal side of it, the contractual side of it, it was such a, the producing side, which is huge, we had, three very prominent producers working on it, and they all had a big job on their hands. And so, it was, to be able to just switch off that part of my brain and just focus on the directing part of it it was such a great opportunity. It was everything I guess I've always wanted without realizing it.
One of the interesting things that I thought about the film, the dramatic side especially, was your portrayal of a family that had fractured. Just tell us a bit about your interest in that theme of family fracture.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, I know, I've seen it happen with a lot of my relatives. I've seen it happen with friends of mine. It's probably more common than it is for it not to happen. I mean, I can't think of many families where it doesn't happen to some extent. And I think the thing I loved about this idea, and one of the big appeals it had for me was, it was for me, it was like a story about a woman who has a chance to see what the world looks like without her in it. This is what the world looks like after you left it. And the family, she was the one who held everyone together. She was the glue of her family. She was the kind of matriarch. And when she was gone, that glue wasn't there. And so the family just started to fall apart. And she got a second chance to see her family again, to see what had happened. And she, I think, got to realize that it was, obviously a great thing that she was the thing that held the family together, but she needed to make the family be able to stay together without her, knowing that she was going to slip back into her dementia. And I think that was the challenge for her, is how can I how can I help my family, but in a way that they're no longer dependent on me. And that was kind of a tricky thing for her. And I think that's what excited me about the story, because, it is a reality for so many families and so many people. And I was hopeful that people would connect with that. Everyone's got someone that they've got some distance with that perhaps they wish they didn't.
Well, I think a lot of that stuff is very well observed, and you do have a very, very strong cast in this film. I think the story is very strong. We are, as we speak, a week away from release of this film. And I wanted to ask you about, in all honesty, how you feel about the marketing of the film and the public profile that the film has. What are your thoughts on these matters?
Well, I mean, it's quite hard for me to tell, because I'm in a little bubble where everyone in my world knows about the film that I've made, and so everyone's sending me every time they see a poster or a web banner with the, they send it to me. So I start to think that everyone in Australia knows about this film because I do, because I'm. But of course, if I stepped outside of that bubble, I don't know how. I would love to just walk up to someone on the street and ask them, have you even heard of this film? Do you know it's coming? Do you know anything about it? I don't know how many of those people would have heard of it, would have seen it. I mean, I think that the marketing is very targeted. It's a low budget film, so we don't have the luxury of kind of having, billboards everywhere and TV commercials and all that kind of thing. So I know that the marketing is very targeted at the older audience. And so I'm just really hopeful that that's getting through, and that I mean, I think the thing that we're most hopeful for and probably most reliant on is word of mouth. You know, that people will see this film and they'll think of people that would enjoy the film, and that, you know, that will spread that way, that people will tell their friends and their friends will go and see it, and it'll lead on that way.
The American approach to marketing is basically 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the film comes out in the territory. You want it to be second nature that people know the title, they know the film, and they just know that it's out. And hopefully, almost as an impulsive response, they will go see it like a Skinner experiment. They will automatically go see it. I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about that, or whether you think it's a level playing field, that it's right and proper and fair that American films do this. Should there be more, perhaps, government funds for marketing a film? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I mean, definitely the you know, the way that those kind of really highly marketed films, which are usually the American films, work is that by the time the film comes out, you would have seen that film advertised 4 or 5 or 6 times. You would have seen a bus go by, you would have seen a poster, you would have seen a web banner, you've seen a review in a newspaper. You know, so by the time you think, oh, I might go to see the movies tonight, when you think of what movies are on, you know instantly that, you know, that comes front of mind, and that's hugely makes a huge difference in terms of the success of that film. With local films, you know, typically we don't have that kind of budget, and so a film. I mean, this is a kind of film that could easily have been made in somewhere like the US. It's not a story specific to Australia. It's a, you know, dementia is something, and family is obviously something that happens everywhere. Um, so it is a story that could have been made there and then promoted here heavily. It's not that kind of film, but my hope is that it will have the same relevance to people here, perhaps more because it's local. But we are always working against the bigger marketing budgets of those overseas films, and I mean, now is probably the best time of all for Australian films, because there is you know, a lack of big American films because of COVID. And we've seen that with The Dry and Penguin Bloom and High Ground, that they've had, you know, record-breaking numbers show up for those films. I think it's such a, you know, it's one of the few positive things that have come out of COVID, is that it's a chance to kind of really look at our own cinema and appreciate that, you know, we can make our own films. And, you know, I think, but so often we're kind of, you know, we're drowned out by the overseas films that have just so much bigger spend. They have bigger stars. I mean, that's another interesting thing, is the power of recognizable faces. You know, when someone's going to deciding what film to watch and they look at a bunch of posters, a lot of that decision is based upon the level of celebrity of the people in the posters, and that's something I kind of realized making this film, that actually does, you know, really impact people's decisions. If it's got, you know, a big A-list actor in it, then they're much more likely to trust that film than they are with a film that has someone they've never seen before.
I know Screen Australia has got money in this, and I wish that
Yeah.
there was also a division that would have said, well, okay, we're gonna match the budget dollar for dollar and advertise the thing. In a fantasy world, mate, how would you feel about that if your budget was matched dollar for dollar, or even dollar 50 cents to a dollar, with marketing funds? What would you say to that, just as a hypothetical?
Well, it sounds fantastic. I mean, you know, what's always interesting with film is the ratio of production money versus advertising spend. And, you know, there's been periods where it's been 50-50. And it's kind of, I think with American films, it's now the marketing spend typically is higher than the budget for the film, because they realize that the marketing is so critical.
Mm.
So if we were offered that extra money on the marketing spend, I would be torn between, you know, that's money we would love to have spent in the making of the film, but then if the film gets that improved production value but no one knows about, then it's kind of moot, you know. So that's always a tricky balance, I think, for producers and for distributors, is how much do you spend on the production and how much do you save for the actual marketing.
I wanted you, as a director, to explain the importance of casting a car.
Ah.
because you have a Valiant in there,
Yes.
a Valiant which is, well, a convertible. Presumably you can put a roof on that thing, but that's a 1966 Valiant you got there, brother. Um, can you just explain to us, from the point of view as a writer director, the importance of casting a car like that in a film? What it
Well,
means, what it represents. Why did you go for that car? Tell us about the casting of a car.
that's that's interesting. No one's asked me that question, but it is a very significant part of the process of making the film. And we spent a lot of, we had someone whose job it was to cast, to throw the net out and try to find the right car for us. And we spent a lot of time looking at other cars, and they were talking to all sorts of different car collectors and car clubs trying to find the right car. There was a number of factors in this particular car. The thing for me uh, that was most important was that I wanted those three lead actors side by side sitting in the front. So I needed bench seats in the front of this car. I wanted it to be a convertible because I wanted, one of the first things I saw was the poster. I could see the shot of the three of them in the front with a dresser in the back, driving through the countryside. And that's, that's trickier than it sounds, because to find a convertible with bench seats with a back seat as well, there's a lot of coupes and things where you might get bench seats, but you don't have a back seat. So that was one of the trickiest things. Not obviously you want a car that is, well, maybe not obviously, but we wanted a car that June would see in the garage and go, all right, this is it just launched the second part of the film, where she jumps into this car and it's her chance. She knows she's only got a few hours, and this is a great chance for her to kind of live, to have a bit of life. So it needed to be a beautiful car that anyone would want to jump inside and just ride off into the sunset. But it also needed to serve that purpose of allowing those three actors side by side, having this kind of bonding. I could imagine we might have been forced to put one of the actors in the back seat. It would have just changed the dynamic completely. So we had a lot of tick boxes that we had to tick, and that's why it took us so long to find that particular car. And in the end, that car actually is it's a bit fictional, because it's not a production line car, because it was actually converted for a Korean car commercial where they took the roof off to make it into a convertible. So it's not actually a convertible model. So there was actually a bar behind the back seat to replace the structural element of the roof, and so we're very lucky to find it in the end.
You mentioned something there that I do want to address. You had the image of the poster that we now see in cinema foyers. You had that image in your head while you were making the film?
Yes, I did, and that's not to say that it was a direct line between that image and the poster being made. There were many other versions of the poster that were put forward, because we don't actually, as a director, I don't control the poster design. I have some input, but it was, I think, I don't know if other filmmakers do this, but when I kind of am constructing the film, I think about what the poster might look like, but I also think and it's kind of a bit of a trope, but to think about trailer moments. What are the moments that audiences will kind of remember when they see the film, and they're often the moments that the trailer makers will use to kind of bring an audience in. So, but for me, it was kind of, if I had to put the film into one image, what would be in it? And it was the dresser, because that's a big part of the story. But it was also the three of them together. Having all three of them being separated at the beginning of the story, the three of them coming together, and then a journey. So that, this beautiful car being the kind of vehicle for that journey. So when I was trying to think of the whole story in a single image, that's what I thought of. I thought of the three of them in the front of a convertible with a dresser poking up behind them. A dinky old dresser upside down with the legs poking up in the air.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how I didn't actually think that would be the poster, but that was my kind of the version in my head, and it's amazing how close the finished poster actually has come to that.
Let me just quickly make the point that I think another ongoing issue with a lot of Australian films is that even if the film is good, the poster art sometimes does a lousy job in selling the
Mm.
film. Well, kudos to the people who made the film with you for producing a really, really good piece of poster art. It's very attractive, it's very strong, and hopefully
Oh,
will
thank
help
you.
sell tickets. So I just wanted to make that point that you actually had an image in mind while you were making the film that, fortunately has carried through to the end product. But I did find that, look, when you were full on dramatic, when the scenes were dramatic, when the focus was dramatic, I thought it really sang. I thought these scenes are terrific. It's a lot of tough dialogue in there,
Yeah,
a lot of character pushback when someone says something. So there was a lot of grit in the exchanges, which I thought was really, really good to see. I felt that when the film got a bit light, I kind of felt that that's where it maybe got a bit clumsy or it got a little bit cliched. And let me just give you one example.
yeah, yeah.
When we meet the person who's now running the wallpaper factory, he is the rat with the gold tooth stereotype guy. He's got the hair coloration going. He's got the 1970s porno mustache. He's got a cheap suit. He looks like a shyster,
Mm.
and I was a bit disappointed there. I know why you did it, so that the visual punchline to that whole sequence when the thing happens with the dumpster,
Yeah.
that you needed to feel that this guy deserves this,
Mm.
and it also of course aligns our sympathies with the main character. But I'm just wondering, when you were doing that, why did you go for such an obvious archetype? Why couldn't you have done it maybe with one foot in realism? Maybe not give
Yeah,
him a
no,
moustache.
I totally hear you. I mean, it's such an interesting point you make. Well, and I completely agree with you. What's interesting when you're preparing, in the pre-production phase of making a film, you are you don't yet you haven't seen the film yet. It's just in your minds and the minds of the actors and the crew and the production designers and things, and it's a conversation that's fluid and happening between you. And so you're making all sorts of decisions about each separate scene, and it's not till you start shooting the film that the things start to become real, and you start to find the film in the process of making it. And you're right. When by the time we got to that scene, the film had become something slightly different to the conversation that I'd had with that actor, with the production, with the wardrobe. And so by the time we shot that scene, even the moment we started shooting, I knew that it wasn't. It was a bit more comedic than the rest of the film. It was a bit more broad. It was a bit more stylized, and we did a lot. But we'd already made a lot of commitments to that. The wardrobe, the moustache, for example, the moustache. Every time I see the moustache, I rip it off in my mind because it was just, it's from a different film. It's a film that that I had that it could have been, and it didn't end up being that film. And so I, and I've learned a lot from that. This is my first film, and those kind of lessons are valuable. And in the edit process, we did a lot to kind of balance that scene and that character with the other moments of the film. So it's very interesting that you bring that up, and it's a great observation. And I hear you completely. And I think if I get the chance to make another film, then hopefully I'll be more kind of able to kind of evaluate those things in the pre-production process, and in my conversations with the different departments and actors and so on. But it was a real learning experience to kind of to realize that you find the film in the process of making it. Each day that you show up on set, the film becomes more and more of itself, and it tells you what kind of film it is. And if you've made decisions leading up to that don't jive with that, then you've got to somehow work that into the film.
It's the total shifts that kind of stand out. That when you're doing the dramatic stuff, it's really feet planted just on the floor, and it's really, really good. I'd say 70% of the film has this very consistent and engaging tone, but then you have scenes where the characters appear to be doing things that, given what we've already know about them, they wouldn't do. What do you think, JJ? Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I guess it's a fair comment. I mean, I think I saw it that June has she knows she has a limited time, and that she desperately wants this thing, and she's kind of maybe doing something she wouldn't on a normal day do, but this isn't a normal day, and she kind of does something a bit audacious, but that's a fair comment. I can't argue with that.
Now, JJ, you have put up in the last couple of days some of your short films on YouTube. So I guess I would have asked you this anyway, but given that you've done that, can you just tell me a bit about the importance of the short films that you've made? And of the ones that I've seen, I think they're very, very good and they're very entertaining. And they're also doing what short films are supposed to do, which is actually tell a story, not tell a joke. So can you just tell me a bit about the importance of making short films and how that has informed your work on your first feature film?
Well, one thing I'd say about short films is that they're such a great opportunity to try things that you wouldn't normally try if you had all the pressure and people involved and the finances involved with a feature film. I mean, I'd made a number of short films, and I was trying to decide what to do next. And a lot of people were suggesting I should make a feature film. I should try and get funding and make a feature film. But I felt like I wasn't ready. I mean, that's a huge undertaking. This is going to involve a lot of other people. It's going to be their livelihood for a number of months. You're asking for taxpayer money, probably, if it's an Australian production. So you want to make sure that you're absolutely ready. And I wasn't ready, so I decided that rather than making a feature film, I would make a number of short films in a period of time. I decided to make 12 short films in 12 months as an exercise, because I knew they wouldn't all work. And they wouldn't all be perfect, and maybe none of them would be perfect, but it would be a chance to just make mistakes, to try things I wouldn't normally try, different ways of working with actors, different ways of writing scripts, storylines that I wouldn't normally even think to try. And it turned out to be such a great exercise because it gave me all those opportunities, and it was a year of it was a crash course film school. I mean, I had made films before, but this was intensified, and I think if I hadn't done that, it would, there'd be so much that has gone into June Again that wouldn't be there. All the things that I learned that I couldn't even tell you, that I can't, and it's because you don't have that pressure of 50 people standing around you and producers kind of counting the dollars ticking away. With a short film, it's usually a group of a smaller group of people. There's your own money involved. If it goes a little bit over, then that's on you. And so you have the liberty to try things and be bold and to be experimental. And I think that's really important with film, that we do that, because otherwise we'll end up just making the same films over and over again.
I don't know if you are even allowed to answer this, but are you able to give us some idea about what the budget on this film was?
Well, I'll be guessing. No one's ever told me the budget, but based on what I've kind of gleaned, I think it was just over $2 million. Whether I'm right or wrong, it's not something I was privy to, but I think it was roughly in that kind of ballpark.
Wrong. You couldn't pay for cab fare with $2 million on an American studio film. That is incredible. If you don't mind my saying, that's a very, very low number. You said it was low budget. You didn't say it was this low. That's remarkable. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And this is something that I ask a lot of filmmakers, local and overseas. Again, no right, no wrong answer. And this is where I come to you as a studio suit with enough authority to make a deal with you, young Australian filmmaker JJ Winlove. JJ, we've seen your film at the studio. Absolutely think it's a lovely little movie you've made. We'd like you to come over to America. We want you to direct an American version of this film. We've got Diane Keaton in there. We've got Will Ferrell, who wants to play the son. We've got some wonderful actresses who want to play the daughter. Anna Faris is interested in playing that. But Diane Keaton wants to make the movie, and we can discuss with you about cast. Want you to come over. Want you to remake it. Want you to just sex it up a little bit. we kind of want the performances a bit more hyper. We want more comedy in there, and we want the drama, but we also want the drama to be hard hitting. But we want you to dial up the humor. We want to sell it as a comedy drama. But we really want, the comedy crowd to come see this, maybe get a little message. You can put that in there. But we do want you to make these changes. Jay, and we'll give you, of course, studio distribution deal once the cinemas open up again, of course. But we'll give it a very, very good distribution platform. JJ, what would you say to that offer?
Well, it's interesting because if you'd put that offer to me before I made the Australian Dune again, I would have probably jumped at it. Whereas now, I think like a lot of filmmakers, I just had this inbuilt just Hollywood focus. But I think having the great opportunity to make the film here has taught me that, there are different ways of making films. And, while I might enjoy a much wider audience in the US, I think I would be much more cautious to just kind of fall in line with the Hollywood model. I think, I'm quite happy to wait to go over there until I have enough kind of my own weight to make my own, to call my own shots and to say, this is how I want this film to be made. We'll see. Maybe I'll dive at the first opportunity, but I think I'm much more. I think I'm already much more confident to say, no, that this is what the film needs to be, whether it's made here or whether it's made in the US or whether it's made in the UK or anywhere else. That this is the kind of films that I make, and this is what I know will work. And if you want to heighten it much further than this, then it's not my film, and I don't want to make it.
Let me sweeten the deal a little bit for you, okay? One is that if you come over and do this for us, pretty much, make the film that we want you to make, or rather remake the film that we want you to make, you're going to get a lot of experience and a lot of exposure in the industry here that you would otherwise have to wait maybe a decade to get if you don't take this up. So it's going to fast track your exposure anyway. Also, JJ, we'll offer you a first look deal on your next movie. Not going to guarantee that we'll make it, but if you come over, do this for us, we'll be your first port of call with whatever film you want to make. And if it's a little film, we might even bankroll the whole thing. Not a promise, but that's on the table. What would you say in those circumstances? Still no, or would you think about it?
Yeah, probably still a no. It doesn't. Maybe I'm not forward thinking enough, but I like to think that whatever I've made will create its own opportunities, rather than having to kind of, have some opportunity lined up with a first look deal. I think I would rather just make the film I want to make and see what opportunities that creates.